Good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited to be part of this virtual event today discussing the future of cybersecurity. My name is Joe Bertnick. I'm the CTO of cybersecurity at Comtact, and I'm joined by Elliot Went from Sentinel One today. And we're here to discuss some of the biggest trends that are impacting how we think about cybersecurity, both automation, AI, across the ecosystem. For me, any conversation about cybersecurity really starts with looking at the nature of attacks that we're defending our organizations against. And as we look at that evolving threat landscape, we see that the battlefield has changed. It's no longer one where we're looking for malicious insiders or specific attacks that are being targeted. We're really dealing with a battle of scale. Attackers are now mining information from multiple different sites. An attack starts usually with social interaction sites, everything from providing content to your child through Disney to being able to go through and connect with other runners and other athletes in a particular sport that I may enjoy. It may also be people that interact together, maybe socially. And all of this information is now able to be mined en masse by different groups of attackers. And so no longer do we need to have vertically integrated attackers that go everything from mining data to taking it to breach through all the different stages. Now we have very modular attack teams, if you will, very organic in design, that really has been driven by the marketplace economy of the dark web, that now can focus on individual aspects of the attack. One group can simply mine data from different websites, whether it's accessing social media content or accessing information about a particular activity. And all of these really looking for those users that have linked those to their professional accounts, the users that have bad passwords that they're reusing across multiple sites. All of these threat surfaces that are our end users become really the first element of the attack. And all of these looking for areas of opportunity where in the past we might imagine an attacker is looking for one person to get into the organization. Now they're looking for 50 or 100. And so this attack at scale has really transformed the nature of how we defend our organizations, because our defense needs to be able to deal with the fact that we're going to have attacks that are going to move from one group to the next in a very modular approach. And so we need to scale our defenses to be able to respond to that. And part of that is to deal with the kind of automation that our adversary is using. So we need to automate the defense of attacks at scale by going through and really starting to close the gaps between when we discover an attack and when we actually remediate it or fix it. Being able to automate security operations so that a smaller team can focus its resources on targeting the areas of interest that are most at risk to the organization versus being mired in doing a number of operational activities. The nature of this battle has changed at scale. Adversaries are scaling and employing more and more hackers as part of their collectives, and our IT groups are not growing. So we need to be able to find a way to take a small team to be able to leverage all the different components that are available to be able to defend against a highly organized, highly automated, and very modular group of attackers. And so in thinking about this battle of scale, there are a couple of technologies that have been evolving pretty significantly over the last 5, 6, 7 years that really come into play in being able to defend against this adversary. The first of which is artificial intelligence, and you can call it by a number of different terms: artificial intelligence, machine learning, but it's how to make sense of the information that's available to us. And we've struggled with that because the information available has been disparately stored in lots of different places. So how do we create the large data lakes that are necessary to be able to use AI and machine learning to develop better intelligence? Additionally, how do we use AI in ways that allow us to not only understand and learn about the organization, but also how to better use AI to defend against it? And we can use this AI for some really compelling use cases, such as crowdsourcing threat intelligence, especially where we're able to share information across multiple customers. Be able to mine IOC data across the enterprise now. Our platforms and technologies are becoming more instrumented, more able to participate in an IOC data sharing exercise. So how do we pull that information from all these disparate endpoints, devices, network segments, et cetera, into a single place so we can better understand it? And then taking that, how do we then understand the threats that really impact our organizations, be able to zero in and investigate those, and be able to extend that across the enterprise? And we see AI really reaching a tipping point for organizations. It's not about the next great innovation. It really comes down to how more organizations can be able to leverage this technology and this capability within their businesses. And so we've seen the move to the cloud by security vendors, by customers, really enabling large data lakes of information, which is that kind of first challenge that AI has. But then customers have also been transforming their infrastructures, moving those into the cloud. And so all of these cloud workloads now have data and information available within them. Some of this IOC and MDR or EDR data that becomes really interesting are now able to automatically be pulled together because we don't need to install yet another agent on all these cloud workloads. So that also increases the amount of information that we're able to derive from our infrastructures. Additionally, AI is driven and supported by so much information across multiple products. And with that, the ability for multiple layers of defense to consume threat intelligence, to be able to identify areas of risk, mean that we can be able to do threat hunting across multiple attack surfaces. So now, today, we can have a single console that allows us to identify an attack, be able to research that information in one particular place, and then move on to our endpoint console to do additional threat hunting, or our network analytics to do additional hunting. And ultimately what this means is that the days of building it yourself, trying to derive this intelligence, and then even thinking about how to act upon any of that information are really gone. This tipping point for artificial intelligence really becomes powerful for organizations. Additionally, the second technology that's really been at the heart of this is the technology around automation. Now, within the security space, we have a specific market segment that we refer to: SOAR operations, security operation or orchestration, automation, and response. These platforms really automate the security workflow across that life cycle. And where you would typically need to stand up your own SOAR platform using open source or commercial products, or try to connect different pieces together, automation now has gotten to the point across multiple products, and the level and richness of the APIs that enable products to work together has really grown across the technology landscape. And so now we can use automation to really augment our team through the entire life cycle. And all of these SOAR products really focus on the whole life cycle of managing an incident. And so the ability to automate an incident from beginning through the entire process, whether that's having initial people reacting to it, to investigation, to remediation and response, is a really powerful tool. And these SOAR platforms have really plugged a lot of gaps. And one of the challenges that a lot of organizations have been facing over the last 5, 6, 7 years is the fact that their security technologies are all very threat surface specific, operating as independent components within their infrastructure, meant that a lot of attacks that targeted the gaps between products, the time delay in being able to identify an incident, to do investigation, all of those gaps created an opportunity for attackers. And so by being able to integrate across multiple solutions to fill these gaps, whether it was something as simple as connecting to a ticketing system or automating the actual remediation of an attack, we've seen transformational capabilities around SOAR technology. Recently, we're working with a customer where they had a number of users that started to report odd behavior. They were seeing emails coming in. They were concerned that they might have a breach within their organization. We went through and started doing investigation, and because of the automation, we were able to go from having a user that had suspicious behavior, isolating them from the network, completing an investigation, understanding that in this, luckily, particular case, there was a false positive, and reconnecting that user to the network with confidence within a span of under an hour. And that ability to manage not only the detection and the response to threats becomes really compelling, because it means, again, we can start to identify those that we have high confidence in and completely automating those aspects of our security operations, as well as being able to investigate and dig deeper into those suspicious activities and really make the whole process much more streamlined. And these two technologies really come together in helping us see kind of the next generation solutions that organizations have available to them. Now, while AI and automation are broad topics that could be addressed in a lot of different ways, we see a changing standard within cybersecurity. Now, AI and automation can really be deployed in lots of different ways, but we're seeing some very common capabilities across technologies that we think become very good approaches to the kind of selections you can make in different solutions that you employ and services that you consume. Because ultimately, these capabilities help us drive defense at scale. First, it comes with everything being cloud-based, because with the cloud, we have large data lakes of information for AI. We also have easier platforms to automate and interconnect across solutions. And so cloud-based technology ensures that not only are we able to leverage these capabilities, but also our security is continually learning and staying up to date. That agility, that nimbleness, if you will, really goes to defense at scale. Secondly, we see that a lot of these technologies have now become complete stack solutions. They're not just an endpoint product or an endpoint detection and response product or vulnerability scanning at the endpoint or remediation and troubleshooting at the endpoint. They really have become full stack solutions so that from one technology, not only can I understand everything about that endpoint, I can collect data about that endpoint, but the protection technologies are integrated directly in with the detection and response capabilities. So I have a single solution to be able to support managing and securing my organization. So I have all the tools available to me. And those tools are key because these technologies need to be more than just protection. They need to understand detection and response lifecycle approaches and workflows. They need to be able to identify when a breach has occurred and help organizations better react to that. And so assuming failure, if you will, assuming that a breach is going to get through, not being focused solely on protection and adding the detection and response capabilities that become really relevant, then enable us to use these solutions across a lifecycle. And the last bit is being able to store the necessary threat hunting information so that you can do active threat hunting across different surfaces, whether that's endpoint, web and mail, being able to look at data protection, network protection, and being able to see threats across the organization, identify them and hunt them across multiple platforms. And those really become very compelling use cases for us to be able to have an interwoven set of technologies and services that really better help us protect our whole organization. And when technologies are cloud-based, full stack and with embedded protection, do detection and response and threat hunting, they really are leveraging the power of automation and AI to allow us to defend our organizations at scale. Within Comtact solution architecture, we really takes these concepts to heart and is based upon not only a group of services that we wrap around and deliver to our customers, but also the technology that underpins them. Everything from our security service desk, where we produce security monitoring, manage threat detection, endpoint detection and response, vulnerability management, penetration testing, as well as consulting services and breach assessment, all leverage this, employing ubiquitous threat intelligence at every device, because every device needs to be able to understand the threats that are associated with it and be able to potentially react. It allows us to embed AI at the endpoint, for example, embed it at the web perimeter, at the proxy, if you will, or within the network. Additionally, we look for solutions that are highly automated because that automation means that we can be able to deliver more integrated threat response use cases to our customers. We can be able to take advantage of smaller teams either on the customer site or within our organization to be able to let us do more work with a smaller group of people so they can be able to really focus on threat hunting and other investigation services. And where possible, all of that work is really fed by machine learning and AI, so we can better understand the threat landscape that's facing our customers here in the UK, as well as being able to deliver better intelligence and better analytics on each and every individual attack. And all of this enables us to embed intelligence across the infrastructure for our customers and be able to respond and react to security incidents in a much more efficient, much more scalable way than we were able to before. We have a couple of technologies that are really core to our solution offering. Among them is Azure Sentinel. Now, Sentinel is Microsoft's SIEM solution that's based inside of the Azure cloud. And this becomes a common platform for integrated threat detection and response, allowing us to create this data lake of information and mine that across the whole of the Azure estate, as well as all the integrated products that are feeding information into Azure Sentinel. And this becomes a single platform to be able to identify incidents, be able to manage the detection and identification of those. It also acts as a full threat hunting platform for us and allows us to automate through logic apps and a number of different product integrations the response and remediation of security incidents. Azure Sentinel becomes a very powerful tool in the right hands to be able to take your security, be able to apply these technologies and defend your organization at scale. Now, the second technology, which I won't steal too much of Elliot's thunder around, is SentinelOne. SentinelOne, from our perspective, becomes a critical component because it enables us to deliver managed detection and response at the endpoint. Imagine a scenario where if a breach occurs down at the endpoint or risky behavior occurs, something like a ransomware attack at the endpoint, with SentinelOne, not only can we identify that a ransomware attack occurred, flag that within security operations, but we can even connect to the Windows rollback features to be able to take that endpoint and roll it back to before the ransomware occurred. All of this in a very automated fashion. And with many of our customers, the integration of both Azure Sentinel with SentinelOne means that we have two very powerful solutions working together where we can be able to detect incidents occurring at endpoints, bring that into Azure Sentinel, and add additional threat intelligence to that information that we've learned from Active Directory, that we pulled in from Office 365, maybe from other security solutions at the network and at the perimeter, understand the nature of that attack, implement that back into our SOC process, and then remediate that endpoint directly. What that means for many of our customers is we're able to close the gap on a security breach or security risk very, very quickly because we have strong capabilities at the threat surface, in the case of SentinelOne, and centrally being able to correlate and pull that information together using Azure Sentinel. And as you see, SentinelOne becomes a really powerful tool. But as I said, I don't want to steal too much of Elliot's thunder. Let me now hand things over to Elliot Ward from SentinelOne to discuss how this can be used across your organization to be able to deliver managed detection and response at the endpoint. Thanks, Elliot.
Thank you, Joe. So my name is Elliot Went. I'm a senior systems engineer at SentinelOne based in the UK. And I'm going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes going a little bit deeper into some of the detection and response use cases using machine learning and AI on the endpoint. Now, if you're not familiar with SentinelOne, we are a XDR, as they're calling it, platform, which is a consolidation of traditional AV, EPP, and EDR type technologies. And when we think about those, different markets around traditional AV, next-gen AV, etc., the technology is such these days that there is absolutely no requirement to have multiple different endpoints doing multiple different security functions in relation to detecting, protecting, responding to those threats. And so SentinelOne was built from the ground up with this vision of singularity platform, essentially meaning a single technology, a single agent, consolidated across entire estates, both workload and server, that provides not only easier consumption, but higher level of protection across those estates. So with that said, we talk about commoditized threats, we talk about advanced threats, but the fact of the matter is low and slow and sophisticated attacks are not going out of style, as you can probably tell by and you've probably been told many times before, the breaches that are continually occurring and how normalized that's become. And so we're increasingly seeing adversaries that are using multi-technique automation essentially to bulldoze through defenses, and these are becoming a lot more accessible now with the commoditization of advanced threats and threats as a service type attacks. And these attacks are designed to unfold in seconds, as they're designed to spread laterally at very high speed. Of course, old school antivirus and EDR systems that rely on cloud and human analysis, firstly, they're too slow, and secondly, they do too little essentially to halt these attacks before they can get their hooks in, before they can really do the damage. So SentinelOne solves the attack velocity problem with our proprietary technology, which is patented, which we call Storyline and active EDR technologies. So imagine a related set of processes, good or bad, as a thread or a storyline. And we track every thread in this story as it unfolds in real time at the endpoint. And we maintain all of these process relationships throughout each story's life. And so it's this storyline that becomes the contextual superglue that we use throughout our platform. Now, as the storyline tracks the code in real time, SentinelOne's active EDR technology applies machine learning-based behavioral scoring to every single event as it occurs. In this case, we see that the storyline is beginning to perform all sorts of nefarious activities and evil. And so active EDR has already determined that this story must be terminated because it exceeds the bounds of what the agent considers to be normal. So the storyline inherently tracks the root cause from the beginning through to what's happening right now at the current point in time, because we monitor every static or dynamic event on the machine from the moment that it's born to the moment that it dies. One of the major benefits of this is that we are able to understand the full comprehensive narrative of that threat, and we understand everything that's been tarnished on that machine from that threat, and so we're able to take actions to remove those. So we can surgically remove all of those tarnished artifacts, configuration changes, files in that machine, and return that machine to a normal operating state. So the endpoint agent itself mitigates attacks in literally moments, within split seconds, which is far faster than any cloud analytics or human-based system could ever hope to achieve. And of course, these events are happening, these processes are happening in the hundreds every single second concurrently on a machine. And the storyline and the active EDR element are core to the SentinelOne platform across Windows, Linux, Mac, across cloud containerized workloads with feature parity. There's no smoke and mirrors around whether we function on those or how well we function on those different platforms. And so having the ability to determine, I hate to use the phrase, but the needle in the haystack when you're talking at the minutiae level, that translates very quickly to efficiency and effectiveness at a macro level when you're talking about protecting thousands of endpoints. So I've kind of introduced you to the concept of storyline, to the concept of active EDR, and using machine learning to do that. And I'm going to hopefully add a bit of color to that now by showing you a real world example and what that looks like in the flesh. And what that fundamental difference that we have in the approach that we take, which is essentially deploying data modeling to the endpoint. We don't rely on shifting data from the endpoint to an external technology up to the cloud to do analysis, deduplication, anomaly detection, all that kind of stuff. We use data modeling at machine speed on the endpoint. And so, for the first major benefit, the first value point that this provides or facilitates is obviously speed. So speed to detection is incredibly quick at split seconds, not just for those known commoditized threats like known malware using reputation lookups and static analysis, but also for and more crucially for those dynamic threats, for those behavioral, like living off the land type attacks, and using those techniques which are a lot more sophisticated, picking those up as they occur and taking action on them, as a potentially innocuous process evolves into being malicious, you need to pick that up at the earliest possible indicator. So speak to detection is one. And then a second benefit of having this true data modeling of every process, of every story, narrative that occurs on the machine, is understanding the context of all of that. If something evolves to the point of being malicious after 7 hours or so, then we know that that process begun its life 7 hours ago and everything that happened up until that point. And so we're able to string together a full narrative of the attack sequence. And when we're talking about advanced or sophisticated threats, there's generally going to be 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 stages of that attack, each of which is constituted by a number of malicious processes or activities. Now, a traditional AV or EDR would most likely provide those in isolation, or at least consolidate a couple of them. But still, there would be a number of different alerts that an analyst would have to interpret, string together, and understand if it's worth their time, if they're related, and how to even triage that. Whereas by really leaning on the AI and the data modeling capability that we have on the endpoint, we're able to make that determination at machine speed, but also consolidate that to make it easily consumable to the user, to see that we have one incident here and it's constituted by all of these different events, all of these different events or story points within that narrative, if you want to. And so the room for interpretation there is completely minimized, and the speed to understanding from a human perspective what's happening is drastically improved. So human overhead there is massively reduced. And then finally, another benefit of having this ability to do that full sequencing is understanding the root cause and understanding everything that was tarnished along the way. And so automating the process of remediation and recovery is extremely simplified and again, massively expedited when you're using the agent to do that. And so what you see in front of you now is an alert. It's an incident within SentinelOne, and it's a single page. It's a threat overview screen essentially for this attack. And this is a relatively complex attack. It's fairly convoluted because this machine is running in detect-only mode, meaning that we're using the full weight of all our detection engines, but we're actually not taking any action at this point. We're just allowing it to monitor and notify as things happen, essentially kind of running in EDR mode. Whereas if this was running in detect mode, then we would kill and quarantine this threat the moment it was written to disk, or the moment that it started to do something malicious, and it never would have got off the ground in the first place. However, running in detect mode, we allowed it to run, and we can see from a threat analyst perspective, we have a number of indicators here which will initially tell us that it's worth our time. For example, the AI scoring level has been malicious. We can see it's on a couple of endpoints. We have some IOCs which we can pivot into, and we can look at various artifacts here. But the key thing I want to focus on is the threat indicator section here, because this really is the output of all of that hard work that's being done, all the legwork that's being done by the data modeling and the AI engines, both static and dynamic, allows us to make that determination of what's happening and correlate that and map that to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but also consolidate that into this single view here. So from an analyst logging into this incident, they see everything that happened throughout this entire attack lifecycle, from the moment that it was exploitation or initial persistence occurred, all the way through to exploitation, privilege escalation, and injection, and everything around that. Of course, these 7 or 8 different phases here are relatively simple to understand from a security analyst perspective. But behind the scenes, obviously, it's a different story. It's a particularly, it's very complex. And this is where the storyline allows us to, bring all of those different seemingly disparate events together, and we can visualize that within the Explore view. And so the Explore view allows us to start to dig deeper into what's happening behind the scenes. And we can see throughout this attack storyline, we have 318 events that actually constitute those 7 or 8 different attack phases, from initial compromise to privilege escalation, etc. So we can see that it's constituted by file modification, file creation, IP connections, and we can even categorize these by MITRE ATT&CK categories as well. But crucially, we can very quickly understand what the sequence of events was and what actually happened at a more forensic level, including command lines that were run, and what the remaining presence of that threat actor is on the machine, allowing us to make a determination of what we want to do next. In this case, we might want to kill and quarantine, but we might also want to remediate to undo any configuration changes, registry changes, permission changes, etc., or even roll back files that were damaged on that machine or encrypted, and basically taking the machine back to a good working state. So this is what SentinelOne does, and it does it very well, and they're continually honing that AI data modeling capability. But it's only as good as the machines you can, of course, protect with that technology, right? And so, again, going back to the singularity vision, the vision of which SentinelOne was built upon, which is essentially to, protect endpoints, and the term endpoint being anything that is, a workstation, all the way up to server, all the way up to cloud, all the way up to IoT and beyond. And so by having that consolidated platform, which brings the full weight of the technology that enables the human element, the few people that you have in your team, to do their job a lot quicker and to do it a lot smarter and to react a lot more effectively, we want to provide that capability across all of those estates. Hence why we have such broad capability across those different environments, using that same technology, that same data modeling capability, that AI, in order to do the high fidelity protection. So I'll finalize on this slide here, which basically kind of rounds up everything we've been talking about, from the traditional reputation-based detection, all the way through to advanced persistent threats, all the way through to EDR and instant response level of forensic capability. And crucially, that technology enabling the ability to do remediation, to do the containment, the eradication of the threat, but also to remediate and get those users back working as quickly as possible. And having that in an easily consumable platform, which is capable across disparate estates, disparate infrastructures, and disparate environments. So I believe we're about out of time now, so I'm going to finish the presentation there, but please do visit the stand, where we will be available for more questions on anything that was covered today. Thank you very much.